Nothing could be further from the truth. I get one opportunity to speak. The state will have another opportunity. So in order for me to respond properly to what they've said in their closing, let me start with some remarks about what the points they've tried to make. Then I'll go into the closing argument that I'm prepared to present to explain to you why the evidence does not show Trayvon Newsom should be convicted of these offenses. I congratulate the state on their slick PowerPoint presentation and on their argument. But argument is not evidence. Supposition, speculation, they're not evidence. Even asking you to use common sense when the evidence is weakest in your case is not evidence. You all, in jury selection, swore to follow the law. You told us that you would, we trusted that you would. And if you do, if you listen to the law the judge reads you, much of it you've already heard, and then look at what the state's evidence really is, not what their argument is, not what the possibilities of what they say are, but what their evidence proves or doesn't prove, you'll find Trayvon Newsom innocent of these charges. The state told you that Trayvon needed assistance to rent the car because they want him included in a principal theory. What was the evidence? He wasn't even there when the car was rented. He had nothing to do with the rental of the car. That's what the evidence was. 2 photo lineups with his picture included. They failed to identify him, although they clearly saw who was there, and those witnesses knew. It wasn't Trayvon Newsom. So the state asks you to suppose that he needed help to rent the car to commit a crime, when no evidence supports it. In fact, contradicts it directly. The state says Trayvon threatened Robert Allen. Well, the testimony was he cursed at him. Not that he threatened him. Not in any way did he threaten him. He lost his cool. Deputy Alvarez was called by the state to back up the testimony of Robert Allen, because I'm sure the state realized at that point you can't believe anything Robert Allen said. So you might totally disregard the fact that he had an outburst. And they needed you to hear it from a deputy who came in and told the truth and said, I heard him string a bunch of curses together and call him a bitch. Not a snitch. But remember how the state tried to take that word snitch and get the context of it in front of you. That it means he's guilty of something and this man is testifying against him. No, that's supposition. That's argument. That's not evidence. Angrily calling someone a bitch for accusing him of a crime he didn't commit is what I expect an innocent man to do, and what you should as well. And that's all you heard. In no way equates with consciousness of guilt, as the state suggests you it does. It could cut easily exactly the opposite, as other evidence in this case does. We'll talk about that. The state makes the point that the other 2 phones don't appear to stop in those PowerPoint presentation, so they had no time to drop off Trayvon. So he must have been with them the whole time. He wasn't with them at all. He didn't have to drop them off. And the evidence proves that. Made very light of by the state, but Detective Curcio told you that the phone evidence from Trayvon's phone showed a call a couple hours before this, and conspicuously a call at 4:02 p.m. in a totally different city. Detective Curcio's own testimony. Is he a magician that he somehow made it those many miles in 3 or 4 minutes after this crime to try to mislead the jury later on? No, he was never there. His day intersected with them later. And then you see, he did some stupid things. He posed with some money, which may or may not have been money he knew was taken from that robbery. But the point is, if he's not a principal in the first degree to it happening, and he's only with them later doing something stupid with the money, which you do have evidence of, you can't find him to be a principal in the first degree. The state doesn't meet the elements of that charge. The state says that Trayvon is bragging about having stolen the victim's money. Do you hear anybody bragging? No, you hear music, and you see guys doing stupid stuff with money, flashing it. And the point I made with Detective Curcio, that, hey, in this social media age, if you go on the internet and look for people flashing money, You're going to see hundreds of people flashing money. It's something big. It's done by young people these days. It doesn't mean anything. Not unless you can link it to Trayvon Newsom knowing he's participated in a murder and a robbery, and he's flashing the money to be bragging about it as the argument is made. But the evidence doesn't support that. And as I pointed to Curcio admitted, yeah, tip box, 2 boxes, thousands of tips. Plenty of other people flashing money in those tips. Doesn't mean they're guilty of anything. Simply means they're doing something that for some reason is possible. Is popular in this day and age. No evidence whatsoever that once they're flashing money, and the state pointed out, there's a couple of minutes between those 2 videos you see of the flashing. No evidence that Trayvon didn't say, okay, now let me pose. Let me do it, you take the picture. As they suggested, somehow Trayvon took the first video without any evidence to support, simply supposition, okay. Even if it did, again, even if they did tell him they had robbed someone and killed someone, him posing with them in a stupid fashion, in a youthful, ridiculous fashion, doesn't mean he's a murderer or a robber. Only evidence can draw you to that conclusion. And evidence that you don't have says that you shouldn't be convicted. But more importantly, evidence that you do have says he wasn't even there and is not involved. 2 gunmen, 2 masks, recovered from a search. Both have DNA on them, neither of which match Trayvon Newsom. This is the kind of evidence that supplants supposition and guesswork and testimony. It is acquittal evidence. You cannot convict Trayvon Newsom if the mask's DNA doesn't match him as the second gunman. Do you remember at the beginning how the state...
Sorry, this your boy Tentacion. Please like the video, like the live, comment guilty, not guilty, or hung jewelry. Share this video, hit the post notification button when I go live. Please subscribe to the channel to help me out, and like the channel if you like the content. I just had to jump in real quick and say the evidence do show that Trayvon Newsom, whatever his name is, Trayvon, was there robbing him. I don't know what this lawyer talking about. Like, he wasn't there, man. The boy was there, flat out, no 100%. That's my opinion, that he was there. And when they come back, a guilty verdict for him, that's going to be a fact that he was there. Because, I mean, in my opinion, he was there. I don't know what this lawyer trying to fight and say he wasn't there. Like, oh, come on, man. Why, if he wasn't there, why would he get part of the money if he wasn't there? If you look back at my last videos, I think it was stating that when the big boy testified against him, he only got, he was saying like he got a couple of dollars, like they was only trying to give him $5,000 or $10,000, or I think $10,000 or something like that. They was only trying to, everybody else split up 10,000 and stuff, or 12 to 15,000, something like that. But they were trying to only give him, they wasn't gonna give him no money at first. Dietrich wasn't gonna give him no money because he did not participate in it. He did not rob him or did anything, so he wasn't gonna get nothing. So that's what he testified and said. That the other defendant told him he gotta get some money, so I guess they gave him $5,000. So if you try to say your client was not there, why would he get any money if he wasn't even there? That don't even make sense. That's just like somebody giving somebody $10,000 just because you're my friend. Their age don't work like that. Maybe if you're a rapper or something, you give somebody that much money on their birthday, but you're not just gonna give somebody $10,000, especially that young kids. They ain't giving my best friend $10,000 just to give him $10,000. No, it's not happening like that. But let's get right back to it, just like that.
They tried to argue to you, well, maybe they weren't trying to get the necklace. They even had Robert Allen testify, well, somebody said don't get the necklace because it's got a clamp on it in the back and you'll have trouble getting it off. How long did that last? Every other witness talked about, yeah, they were definitely trying to grab this necklace. If you want to use common sense, that would be the easiest common sense to use. If you're going to rob someone that's wearing this around their neck, this is what you go for. Maybe there's money in the bag, maybe there's not. How would they have known? But this, I have no idea what this is worth. This is a small fortune. This is the target of those robbers. This is what was fought for on that video. This is what the individuals who didn't have gloves on tried to rip off his neck, which we know from the man who was in the car with him, Jose Envoy, who said, I could tell they were black males only because they didn't have gloves on and I could see their hands as they reached in. He's right there. He's right on the scene.
But sorry for the interruption again. I got to say, put my points in. You know how I just drop my points in. But excuse me, somebody being robbed, and you know what I mean, got a gun in their face. They're not looking at the dude trying to see if they're trying to grab his chain or not. You know what I mean? The man testified that he didn't even know if Takashi 69, XXX Takashi did not know that if he had a chain on or not. So he don't even know what did they grab because he don't know if they got a chain on. And most rappers and like him, yeah, I mean, he going to go buy a motorcycle and he out in really public. Yeah, he might wear the chain, but he might tuck the chain in, like put it inside his shirt, you know what I mean, if he going to, you know what I mean? He really didn't even want to get noticeable. That's why you see him with his hood on and stuff, because he didn't want to really get noticeable. So, you know what I mean? I think he doing a poor job of defending his client, like flat out.
Even the blood on the necklace. Remember at first when they talked about it? Oh, if it was soaked in blood, it could, disperse the DNA. Is there any testimony it was soaked in blood? The witnesses after that, one by one, talked about how even at the hospital, they're trained. They're not going to wash this off before they take it and preserve it in evidence for law enforcement. And she says, you can still see the blood on there today. Yeah, if you look real close, there's a little bit of blood over here on the back, closest to his body, where it probably dripped down. The front is like sandpaper. It's abrasive. If you're going to get DNA from your fingers by touching something, you couldn't find a better object to leave DNA on because it's going to scrape right off. Even at one point, Detective Walcott, in questioning by Ms. Buckaloo, she tried to get him to say that if you touch something, you may not leave DNA there. He said, well, I'd expect to find it there if you touch it. I think she was using this smooth surface as an example, not that abrasive necklace. Absence of that DNA is crucial evidence for the defense. You would expect to find something from the real second gunman somewhere in all of this evidence to link him to this crime. No DNA in the car. No DNA in the necklace. Even the comments made by the state about an alleged text message from Trayvon about money buried in the backyard. Well, aside from the fact that they dug up the entire backyard, didn't find anything, which would cast doubt on the veracity of that, where's the text message? Is that introduced in evidence to you? For you to look at? They say a picture, and Trayvon was attached to it. Where's the picture? You're the jury, ladies and gentlemen. You are the judges of the facts. It is incumbent upon the state to present evidence to support what people say, even police officers. You don't just take things at face value and say, well, it must be true because someone said it. You look for the evidence that proves it either existed or it didn't exist. No photograph, no copy of the text message, no screenshot of the text message. The phone number it was made from doesn't come back to Trayvon. No way to trace it to him, if it happened at all. No testimony from the person who allegedly provided Detective Curcio is presented before you. Why? Well, remember, that testimony didn't even come in until the state's redirect examination of Detective Curcio. It was not part of their case in chief. So when they got up after I asked a few questions about these tip boxes, that's when, in the guise of talking about a tip, he started rattling off about a text message. Sure, that may have been the reason they did the search. But the search turned up nothing that would support the text message being in any way truthful. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, the second gunman is still out there with every reason to make you believe that they got the right guy. If you want to speculate on something, let's speculate on that as being the person that would send that anonymous message, attach a picture of him to it, and try to get a jury to believe that he's somehow admitting he participated in the crime with a piece of evidence you don't even get to consider. This is not the kind of evidence that a reasonable jury can rely on to convict a man of first-degree murder and robbery. Mrs. Shield had brought that up by likening it to a tip box in a case where thousands of tips are received, literally boxes full. Detective Curcio himself testified that, well, yeah, I looked at all of them, but none of them had anything to do with my investigation because they had already focused on Trayvon Newsom because he went back and handed them his license and said, hey, I was driving the car when this accident happened. Why would he do that? Well, maybe he rented the car and he had to get it back to the person that, no, he wasn't even there when it was rented. Did someone ask him to do that? Was he put up to that? Why would he do that if he knew that that car had been involved in a robbery murder just a few hours earlier? That's evidence that's here going on. It's not on the surface of the state's presentation or anywhere considered in it. It's something you have to think about. It makes no sense. It's evidence of he doesn't know at that point what they did or that that car is involved, or he would never have gone back. Two guys jump out of the car and never come back, right? Why did they not come back? But he does. He's not the one who was with them. That's why he gets sent back to get the car. All right, let me start my presentation. Recall that the presumption of innocence and the state's burden of proof are two incredibly important features that jurors have to look at, seriously embrace, to make a correct decision in a criminal case. Trayvon sits there still presumed innocent at this point because you haven't heard everything. You haven't gone back to deliberate and talked about the things that you've heard in evidence or the arguments of counsel. So in that light, and remembering that all evidence must be proved beyond the exclusion of every reasonable doubt for conviction to result, and that all 12 of you are needed to agree that the proof is so clear, we believe he's the one. And the promises you made to us that cause us to pick you, the jurors in this case, to decide the fate of these three young men. Consider that as the backdrop when you begin your deliberations against what I'm about to go through with you. Crucial point in this case. Judge Usan already said it to you. He will say it to you again. And I'm quoting him. Although the three defendants are being tried together, there are three separate cases that they are being considered at once, just for the economy of not having to call each witness over and over again. But you are to consider the evidence that's adduced at trial as it relates to each individual individually. And your verdict as to one defendant should not reflect your verdict as to another. Does everyone understand that? All of you replied, yes. Judge Usan again, can you all follow that? All of you, yes. I absolutely believe that you can. And that if you do, and if you separate the evidence here and do not engage in guilt by association, because clearly he knows these young men. Clearly he was friends with Robert Allen, stayed at his house for a while. You'll realize that the case against Trayvon Newsom is way fully short of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The state case against Trayvon raised questions about him possibly being involved, but provided insufficient answers, and in fact, the evidence the state presented raised numerous reasonable doubts on its own. Evidence in a criminal case and the reasonable doubt that can flow from it comes from lack of evidence conflict in the evidence, or the actual evidence itself. This is a case, and it's unusual, where the evidence itself provides a strong probability, I would suggest, that Trayvon had nothing to do with it. The masks alone, the lack of the DNA anywhere, or fingerprints, or anything else that matches him to the crime, and the inexplicable cell phone evidence that places him miles from the scene just minutes after the crime happened. They can't have it both ways. They can't use cell phone evidence to convict two men and say, well, you shouldn't really consider it about the third man. It goes opposite. The evidence shows Trayvon could not have been there with him if the cell phone is alive and working. And by the way, remember how this all started about the cell phone? For Robert Allen again. I talked about it in my opening statement. And then the next day when Robert Allen is testifying, the state asks him about Trayvon's cell phone. Do you remember what he said? Oh yeah, now I remember. His phone was dead that day. He wasn't using it. Aha, that's why it doesn't show him being near the scene of Reva. Too early on. Later on, Detective Curcio tells you, hey, the cell phone evidence, which was properly gathered, it doesn't lie. It has no motivation to lie. It is what it is. Shows his phone was on, receiving and making calls at times that place him outside the involvement of whoever else committed this crime. Almost impossible for the state's theories to work together to convict all three of these young men. Trayvon Newsom was not that other young man. He was not there. So let's talk about Robert Allen a little bit. Other counsel I know is going to go into great detail about Robert Allen's testimony. I watched your reactions to it. You've all heard all the different times he lied, all through all of his statements. I won't go through them each individually. I'm sure you'll have heard all of that by the time you're done hearing the closings of all three counsel. But I'll just point out a few things about it that I think are most important for you to consider. The testimony of Robert Allen points out the clear legal distinction between physical evidence and testimonial evidence. Physical evidence cannot lie. It has no motivation. It doesn't change based on who's talking about it. It is what it is. People, however, are flawed. Their testimony can be changed. It can be influenced by what they want the jury to believe, or by their own perceptions or misperceptions of what they think they saw. It is no way as reliable as physical evidence. And that's why in this case, the physical evidence will acquit Trayvon Newsom. But the testimonial evidence, like Robert Allen, was damning against him in every which way you could imagine. I mean, he tried 5 different times to change his testimony to fit what the state wanted him to say, to fit their version that this is the missing gunman. He gave him anything he could possibly give. And he even confessed to the fact that if he could get these 3 men convicted, he's hoping to walk out of here in a matter of weeks, maybe a month or 2. 5 or 6 years he's already served. That's what his lawyer told him. Hey, if you cooperate and give them what they want, you can get 5 or 6 years here. And walk on this. What? How could you have a greater motivation to lie? But he's not good at it, thank God. Let's point out how he's bad at it. Well, let's start from who he is, okay? He's a 12-time convicted felon. 12-time convicted felon. And at one point, he kind of defended that by saying, hey, I do fraud. Remember that? I do fraud. That's what I'm 12-time convicted. What is fraud? It's a systematic pattern of lying to take advantage of other people and steal things from them. So he's basically telling you, listen, you really shouldn't believe me. I do fraud. But I won't say anything they want me to say to get these young men convicted because my life is on the line. He walked right through the cameras at Reva. He's right there. You can't mistake Robert Allen. I think a few people have kind of joked about that. He's a clearly recognizable individual. He was cold. He was dead in the water. Had something to say. Do you think for one moment he was going to tell the cops, wait a minute. A give you what you want, but you got the wrong guy? Where would that have landed him? Sitting over there, maybe without Trayvon Newsom, but sitting over there, looking at life. So what did he do? He lied. He lied again and again and again. Nothing to lose. He's an admitted liar, a fraud guy. He is also a cooperating witness, which you've heard the instruction once, you've heard it from defense counsel, and you'll hear it again from the judge at the end. It is a law that has come about after many, many years of jurisprudence in this country. And in many, many cases where it's become absolutely clear and apparent that if someone flips, so to speak, becomes a cooperating witness, testify against the people he says he participated in the crime with, you got to open your eyes to that. You got to look at what the motivation behind that might be. And you got to look at his testimony against the other evidence that supports it or contradicts it. And here, all the physical evidence points against what Robin Allen said about Trayvon Newsom. You must consider the testimony of some witnesses with more caution than others. For example, a witness who claims to have helped the defendant commit a crime or hopes to gain a more favorable treatment in his or her own case may have a reason to make a false statement in order to strike a good bargain with the state. This is particularly true when there is no other evidence tending to agree with what the witness says about the defendant. This instruction could have been written for this case, but it's been around for many years. And it's something you have to take to heart and have to use when you evaluate Robert Allen. 5 statements he made, all under oath before the trial, all different, all packed with lies. Even his trial testimony was contradicted in some ways by other witnesses and by the evidence itself. Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot trust his testimony. The judge will tell you again, black letter law in our country. You as jurors can believe or disbelieve all or any part of a witness's testimony. You need to disregard everything Robert Allen said. Everything he said. Because it's unreliable, it's incredible, and it's not worthy of belief or consideration by you in any way. I know co-counsel will talk more about Robert Allen. But as it applies to Trayvon Newsom, it's the clearest that he's lying to get himself the deal that he's wanted all along. All those years it took him to finally get it. There's nothing he wouldn't have done. Nothing he wouldn't have said. No testimony he wouldn't have twisted to get himself out of this. At the very start of his attempt to get a deal, Detective Curcio and Detective Bronson, in speaking to him, made it clear to him that he had to testify to what their theory of the case was in order to get that deal. That's in writing. That was in the transcripts. There's no way they can get around that. That is a violation of all the principles of good detective work that start with don't put words in the witness's mouth. Let him tell you what he says happened. Because you're stuck with it. Because if you twist it, he's either a liar or you're the one that's putting evidence in there as a detective. So listen to how it goes. Halfway through his October 23rd, 2018 statement, not long after this happened, Detective Curcio says to him, "We've got to go over some things here. The issues you know, obviously, again, when you work this out," a reference to getting the deal he's trying to get by being there and talking to them, "you're going to have to convince a jury that everything you're saying is 100%. And even the little details, like when he's asking you what was being said between, meaning the other guys, you've got to kind of remember everything they were saying." This is after Robert Allen had just said, "I don't remember what they were saying." What is he telling him to do? I don't remember? Well, you got to remember. He's telling him to tell us what you want to hear you say. That's clear. Even Robert Allen understood that. He wasn't going to be able to tell them what really happened and get his deal. He had to tell them what they needed to hear to get all 3 men for this crime. Because the police had already focused by October 23rd, 18, on who they wanted to take to trial. But a couple pages later, in the same record, Robert Allen admits it. He says, it's like you're trying to push me to say something I don't know. They danced around that a little bit with him. That's what the transcripts reflect. That's what the record is. That was the end of any chance of getting him to actually tell the truth. If there was a chance, and it probably wasn't, but at that point, it's over. He's going to give them what they want to hear. But he still wasn't very good at it. It took him 4 more sworn statements in 4 years to finally get a prosecutor to think she needed to use his testimony. And she did. She had nothing against Trayvon Newsom without it. Nothing. In fact, everything points the other way without it. But you can't believe Robert Allen, and you can't convict Trayvon Newsom. Detective Bronson finishes it up. Coup de grace, right at the end of the statement. To Robert Allen, from Detective Bronson, who, by the way, was working for the state attorney's office at the time, as an investigator for them. This comes to fruition. Well, that means if you get your deal, Mr. Allen, you need to think about this, because if all of a sudden you remember something during the trial, they're going to shove it up ours and your rear end. Give us everything we want now. Stick to your story. Don't waver. No matter what those attorneys try to say on cross-examination, you stick to it. Don't change it. Don't add anything. Of course, he did anyway. He added a couple things that didn't make any sense. That the cell phone data refuted, that the DNA eventually refuted, and they finally did the testing. He was never going to say, oh, by the way, Trayvon wasn't with me that day, guys. You got it wrong. The real guy was. Remember when Robert Allen testified about the alleged outburst by Trayvon at him? I didn't really challenge what he said when he cross-examined him, because it was clear my client lost his cool, told him what he thought of him, called him a bitch, cursed him out. Still, they put Deputy Alvarez on again because how could you believe Robert Allen alone? But then, snitch becomes bitch. A little distinction. But who are you going to believe? Deputy Alvarez or Robert Allen? And of course, the state focuses on snitch, because they like that word. That fits the case. But what he said was bitch, and he went on to curse him out. Somehow evidence of guilt is being introduced as evidence of guilt. An outburst by someone like that. That's evidence of guilt. It's evidence of being a person and being angry. That's what it's evidence of, clearly. Nothing else. He lost his cool at a former friend who agreed to tell the story that detectives wanted to hear after they saw Trayvon on Robert Allen and the other social media. And he placed himself in the Dodge Journey a couple hours after the crime. They weren't going to back off on their theory. That was their best chance of getting the third guy here, the guy with the gun, after they'd already locked in. There's nothing else they could do. Okay. So hopefully you understand that Robert Allen's testimony should not be believed or relied on by you. So what does the credible evidence actually prove in this case? Well, the credible evidence doesn't even come close to proving or beyond a reasonable doubt that Trayvon can be convicted of armed robbery and murder. No firearm recovered that can be matched or linked to Trayvon. No witnesses, other than Robert Allen, put him at the scene of the crime that day. Robert Allen said the guns found at his house were not one of the guns Trayvon had that day. Why? If all the guns are together, why wasn't Trayvon's there? Well, Trayvon didn't have a gun, he wasn't there that day, and they wouldn't find his DNA on any of the guns they found, or his fingerprints, or anything else to link him to. So Robert Allen's a liar, but he's not an idiot. No evidence of proceeds from the crime are recovered from Trayvon, even from the alleged search in the backyard where there's supposed to be all this money buried. And believe me, they did a thorough search in that backyard, dug it up. Nothing there. That's the house that Trayvon lived in since he was a kid. He was 18 years old in 2018. No DNA anywhere on anything matches Trayvon Newsom. No fingerprints except on the Dodge Journey, which he drove, clearly. And again, you saw the video. It's kind of funny how things help you to come to the right conclusion in a case that you wouldn't expect. You see one man having trouble backing it up. So Trayvon takes over and backs it up just fine. So you see how Trayvon ends up the driver of the car. No cell phone evidence places him there. In fact, it's to the contrary. No credible witnesses. No proof Trayvon's even at Reva that day. No less that he's the shadowy person you see in the video jump out of the car and appear to brandish a weapon. Again, he goes to the scene of the crash afterwards. He runs because the other guys jump out and run. They don't come back. He does. Because he was driving the car. Hands her the license. Not Trayvon. The car was just using that robbery. And even, didn't Robert Allen say that they had just learned before this crash that the victim had died? Didn't he say that? He should have directed recollection. Okay, so even if, how would that be true? If Trayvon, even if he knew at that point that they had robbed and murdered somebody, and hears from them that the man died, he's going to go back and identify himself with his license in that car. Not the brightest thing to do, Trayvon. No evidence of guilt. Even though law enforcement's there on the scene already. And he goes back. Again, look at the photo lineups. Trayvon's clearly in there for the rental of the car. He did nothing to do with rental of the car. There's no reason for him to come back. Crime scene detective Walcott testified about a lot of DNA evidence. But he also gave us some other important testimony that's consistent through all the law enforcement officers in this case. DNA is crucial in criminal investigations in 2023. It is sophisticated. The testing is incredibly sensitive. They can now test mixtures of many people's DNA and tell you who was there and who wasn't. It can be incredibly important in identifying the correct suspect, and it can also be incredibly important in showing that someone is not the correct suspect. In this case, the police ignored that because they were locked in on their theory already. This case was closed by the time they got their DNA results back. So they just went. Every cell of the body contains DNA, blood, saliva, skin cells. But the necklace. No DNA on that abrasive surface of the necklace. No DNA in the car, in the BMW, anywhere that you can see the violent struggle in there. Allegedly, the second gunman reached in from both sides of the car. No testing even done of his clothing. Even though clearly that would have been touched, trying to get to the necklace. Ladies and gentlemen, again, remember, the defense has no burden to go out and do these tests ourselves. If the state wants to convict someone of murder and you got no DNA evidence, please test everything. Please test everything. They didn't. On them, not on us. Remember, even Walcott testified that while he's at the hospital, law enforcement already knows the necklace is a very important piece of evidence in the case. His words, not mine. Because it was obvious from the video and the live witnesses all agreed there was a violent struggle for the necklace. At the beginning, the state tried to recede from that violent struggle for the necklace by putting on that ridiculous testimony of Robert Allen. That, oh, somebody said that it had that kind of clamp on it, so don't go for the necklace, just get the bag. Ridiculous. Remember, too, witnesses were able to say the suspects were black males only because they weren't wearing gloves. No DNA of Trayvon's from any of the swabs of the BMW, and remember, they swabbed it all over the place. Detective Walcott also testified on cross that no one at the hospital would wash a piece of evidence like that necklace in any way. They know this is a murder investigation, or about to be. Maybe it wasn't pronounced dead yet, but it was certainly a robbery with a shooting. And he's there. He would never let them do anything to it that didn't preserve the integrity of it, so it could be tested. The blood on it had nothing to do with the fact that it didn't get anything wrong. You can see it. Look at it. There's the tiniest little bit of blood on that. It was not bathed in blood or soaked in blood, as the state started to suggest. Maybe we didn't get DNA because it was so drenched in blood. Maybe they washed it off. And this is all just some big mistake. No. It's a lack of evidence. Reasonable doubts come from the evidence, conflict in the evidence, and lack of evidence. The state tried to argue, supposing, well, there's no proof that if you touch it, we would have found the DNA. That's called burden shifting. That's called the state asking you to look for the defense.
Objection, judge, improper argument.
Oral argument, jury, reliance on recollection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Remember the burden of proof. The state accepted it in Fort Dyer. They all told you, look, it's all on us. We got to prove it. They don't have to do anything. We do as much as we can. But the burden doesn't change. If we try to present evidence to you, burden is still on the state. In this case, I have no additional evidence to present to you, Trayvon. It's all there. It's the masks. It's the necklace. It's every other piece of evidence that was tested in every which way that shows nothing linked to Trayvon Newsom, except some stupid photographs. Ms. Buckley, so detective, just because I touch something, does that mean I will leave fingerprints? Detective Walcott, no. Ms. Buckley, just because I'm touching all these items, Detective Walcott, no. Ms. Buckley, just because I touch it, am I going to leave DNA that you would be able to test later on? Surprised by the answer? Yes. You probably left some DNA right there when you touched it like that. I almost fell off my chair. That's integrity. From a detective. No axe to grind. Tell it like it is. I'm not going to give you what you want, Madam Prosecutor, just because you want me to say maybe I didn't do it. We expected to find it on that necklace. That's an important piece of evidence. We expected to find DNA on it. We didn't. That's lack of evidence. No DNA or fingerprints of Trayvon on the bullets, the Jordan bag, the BMW, the necklace, the fingernail clippings. Anywhere we would expect to find it if the state was able to prove he was the second gunman. If in fact he was there. The cell phone. Detective Curcio agrees DNA and cell phone evidence are extremely important in police investigations today. In my opening, I talked about the fact no cell phone evidence links Trayvon to this crime. Then, of course, we get the testimony from Robert Allen. No, his phone was dead. Well, they had his phone number. Police told you that. They obtained a warrant to get all the data they could possibly get from it. They did. Nothing in that data supported him being at Riva. In fact, basically proved he wasn't there. He could not have gotten to a different city that many miles away for that call to have bounced off a tower that far from Riva in 5 minutes. 3 minutes? 3:57 to 4:02? Couldn't happen. Getting Robert Allen to say that was obviously an attempt to get him to make a more favorable impression on the prosecutor, who hoped that he would say something that would help her with that problem that they have with the phone evidence. And again, he was open about this. That's the prosecutor's going to make the recommendation as to how much time he actually serves. And he was honest with you. He knows that he can get convicted. He's got a much better shot of walking out of here. 1:55 p.m. Trayvon's cell phone was in Pompano Beach. 4:02 p.m., 5 minutes after the crime, still in Pompano Beach. Now, the state made a big deal about the fact that he's in that video in front of those apartments switching the driver of the car. It's an hour and a half after the crime. Obviously, plenty of time for him to rejoin his buddies back down in Fort Lauderdale for them to either tell him, hey, look what we did, or not. Just put him in there, not know. Go back and get the car, get the one with the license. Never would have done it if he'd been involved in that crime. There's no reason for us to do it. Everybody ran. They ran from the car. He ran because they ran. Why am I running? I'll go back. Entirely different city than Deerfield Beach when the crime happened. That's what Wade Curcio had to admit. The second call placed to his phone, Ramon's phone, proved through the phone evidence. Again, the state wants you to draw logical inferences, use your common sense. Well, I think you should use evidence or the lack of it. But if you want to draw inferences, what that infers pretty darn clearly is he was never agreeing that day. Yeah, he was with Mr. Boatwright and down by Robert Allen's and in that car later on. But you all agreed in Rhode Island that guilt by association would not be something you consider. It's not the law. You won't hear any law that tells you that because somebody has, poor choice in friends or associates, that they can be convicted of a crime that those friends or associates may or may not have committed. Guilt by association is not something the law permits. You need evidence, and it has to be evidence that proves the elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. In my opening, I asked you to consider whether or not in your life experiences using your common sense, at the end of the testimony of Robert Allen, you would find that he's somebody you'd ever believe anything out of his mouth if you knew the things you knew that you heard in this trial. Obviously, you would not. You wouldn't buy a car from him. You wouldn't believe anything he told you in the on the street. Once you knew. And he would say whatever it took for him to get his chance of freedom. That's his motivation to lie. Discuss it among yourselves when you deliberate. And you, the jury, will see what the facts prove and they don't. And you'll have to concede that with Robert Allen, you just have to disregard it. Everything he said. The state case raised some questions. That it did. But they provided insufficient answers to those questions. And in fact, the case itself raised numerous reasonable doubts. Again, a reasonable doubt because from the evidence, conflicting evidence, and lack of evidence, you have all three of those here. Very present in Trayvon Newsom's case. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much for your attention on behalf of my client, Trayvon Newsom, and his family. I pray that you make the right decision in this case.
Councilman Mr. Williams, did you wish to close?
Judge, can I have a brief comfort break so I can set up?
Take 5.
Thank you so much.
These gentlemen, please step in the back.
Can you let me know when I hit an hour? Thank you so much. I want to start off by really thanking you guys. For me, this is my job, and this has been rough. It's been a rough 10 weeks, and I can't even imagine what it would be to be someone that's in your position where you've had to dedicate and sacrifice so much so that we can get a fair trial here. And I've been watching you guys the entire time, and I know how attentive you've been at every single moment. So on behalf of myself and on behalf of Diedrich, I really want to thank you before I even begin my argument. I started off in my opening talking about the foam finger that they have at baseball games and regarding prosecutors. And a lot of times I use that metaphor that many of them, they put it on and they'll come in here and they'll be like, this man and this man. And I really, to the point that I've been doing this 20 years, and I really think that in prosecutor school, day one is just pointing, the whole day, just practicing pointing. But in this country, you convict somebody not on the power of a point, you convict them on evidence. And as talented as Mrs. Shields is, she's been put in a rough position because she has been given a cast of characters for witnesses that's akin to like the bad news bearers of witnesses. I mean, the list, I'm gonna go through it right now, but she was put in a very bad position when she had to take this case because the witnesses that she has don't have credibility. And you, as jurors, it's your duty to not only listen to someone that's testifying, but to judge their veracity and figure out whether or not they're saying the truth, whether it's a lay person, whether it's an expert, whether it's a law enforcement officer. As jurors, it's your obligation to listen to them and to say, are they saying the truth? And I've seen you guys paying attention, and I want to walk you through the witnesses that we've heard from and figure out exactly, where the issues are with their case. Let's start off with Scott Barbour, the guy that was on the scene. What do we know about that guy? Well, I mean, between me and Diedrich, we call him Interview with a Vampire because he came in here and Mr. Shields had to tell him, hey, take your sunglasses off. He walked up there, he testified. What do we know about him? Well, we know that he asked Mr. Onford for a picture, and when he didn't get it, the first thing he did while the guy was laying there dying is he went and he took that picture. That he told him no, he finally took that picture and he posted it. And you all heard from the medical professionals and other witnesses that Mr. Onford died in the hospital. So this state witness that they put up there is an individual that watched somebody that was in distress and took a picture and posted it. So if that doesn't tell you a little bit about his credibility, I don't know what does. I looked at him and I was judging. I asked him if he was sober. He said he was. He didn't look it to me. But you guys can make your own judgment calls. You could use your common sense to see whether or not that guy was credible. I don't think he was. Now, what did he do? He contradicted his girlfriend, Miss ex-girlfriend, Miss Layla Khan. Miss Layla Khan got on the stand, and really, the main thing that she said was that they were running towards Revo when they heard the shots, which is in contradiction to what he testified to. And I asked her, and she did contradict him. That's one of the many state witnesses contradicting other state witnesses that you've heard in this case. But really, from Layla Khan, I think one of the most important things that we heard from her is that she broke up with him. And I heard a collective sigh of relief. We're like, oh, thank God, poor girl. Then we heard from Leonard Kerr, the best dressed Uber Lyft driver that I have ever seen in my life. That guy was Gucci down to the socks. But he wants us to believe that he lives in a multi-million-dollar house apartment, a mansion. He said, I don't know how much it costs. Now I don't live in a mansion. That he makes all his money from Uber and Lyft, that he's not involved in a Jamaican crime syndicate. However, he had 2 humongous bodyguards sitting here for 2 entire days. And when I pressed him on it, what did he say? No, my family pays for it. Okay, but who in your family? No, my family pays for it. Okay, my niece got a car for her 18th birthday. My family helped her. My sister paid for it. You know what I mean? Like, so I asked them, who's paying for that individual? Because I would like to know, and I believe that the jury should know, whether they're there to guard you or they're there to ensure that you're testifying the way that somebody wants you to testify. And I think that that's a valid question. I couldn't even get there because he refused to answer who was paying those guards. And as jurors, you guys should be able to know that because it goes to the veracity of that particular individual. It was a simple question and he refused to he refused to answer it. Then there's the issue of, while the whole thing is going on, I think that they refer to him, the state refers to him as the step-uncle. While the whole thing is going on, he takes out his phone, he calls Cleopatra Bernard, the mom, and he never even walks up to the car. You guys can make your own determination, because honestly, I'm not going to say it because I've never been put in that particular position. I just think it's really strange that it took him that many minutes to approach the vehicle. Okay, and then he's out there calling Cleopatra Bernard and not really involved. He testified that it took minutes and minutes, and the police got there. So it was a long time, and that's strange. I'm not going to fill in the blanks because I'm not going to tell you something that I don't know, but you guys can think about that. Why is that weird? Why did he do that? Then the bank teller, Cecilia Ramos. Listen, I'm not telling you that the bank teller is involved in this. I'm not. I'm telling you that a proper investigation could have included, hey, what's your phone number? Would you give it to us? I don't think that's out of the realm of the possibilities of a correct investigation. Why? Well, he went to the bank, he wanted $250 million, he took 50, and then all of a sudden he went and got robbed. Whether or not Cecilia Ramos was involved or not, we're not going to know because they didn't ask her for her phone number. And they could have. It highlights tunnel vision, and which is really one of the main things that I said in my opening, and it really affected the investigation of this case. And tunnel vision is like termites to the foundation of a house. If you are an investigator, you have to look at all your options, okay? And bottom line is no one ever asked her anything. She said that he was in a good mood. Mrs. Shields brought that up, that he was in a good mood. Well, that contradicts Scott, because Scott said that he wasn't in a good mood when he refused to take that picture that he eventually took. So that's another state witness contradicting another state witness. We have Tony Robinson. What's the most important thing that you heard from Tony Robinson? That she rented the car for Robert Allen. That Dietrich told her, hey, Robert Allen needs a car. Not we need a car, Robert Allen needs a car. And then she refutes the allegation that Allen made that they were renting cars every day. He said that. We're renting cars every day. I asked her, she said no. Tanisha Clark, the lady that will never rent again on Turo, the worst first experience of any Turo renter ever. The most important thing that came from her was that my client had nothing to do with that rental. Robert Allen was the one that rented that car. Mrs. Delgado, the lady that works for Just for Sports. What did you hear from her? You heard that Deidre was a frequent customer, that he always paid cash, that many people at that location pay cash, that it's not, a rare thing for people to pay cash there. And every time that he would come in, he would buy more than he came for. Okay? From all the state witnesses, you've heard that Diedrich was the kind of guy that had money. From tattooing, from different things, he had money and he would pay in cash, and she bolstered that. She let you know that, yeah, he would call and he would pay for cash. They want to make it seem that, first of all, that $800 is a shopping spree. I think anybody here that goes shopping knows that it's not. Okay, $800 can go quickly. They're making it seem like, and he bought different sizes. I mean, he went and purchased $800 worth of clothing and shoes at a store. That is not an admission of guilt by any stretch of the imagination. Tanel Carter, Diedrich's ex. Her testimony was, if you listen to her testimony, because they took some time to get what Diedrich told her, right? She just said that he was there. Which, when Detective Kershaw was on the stand, and they tried to elicit the same testimony, that's why he said there. There was a lot of people that were there. Scott, Layla, Leonard Kerr, everybody at Riva. There is there. There is a very broad term. And I think they had the obligation to narrowly tailor that in their testimony to figure out, was he in the car? Where was he? But they didn't get that out of Tanel Carter, and they didn't get it out of Detective Kershaw. Actually, if you want to put him in the car, which is one of the things that I told you in the opening, if you want to put him in the car, if you want to say that Diedrich was part of this crime, you have to believe Robert Allen. Now, there's video. There's video, and I'm not going to waste time showing you the video, because I know that in a case like this, that you guys are probably going to go back and you're going to review the evidence, and the video is probably one of the main things you're going to do. Okay, and I'm asking you to do it. okay? And when you look at it, look at the video and you're gonna tell that you can't tell if somebody got out of that car. They're acting like if it's clear. It's not clear. It's obstructed by a tree. Eventually a car rolls up, pulls up, they open up the trunk, things happen. And you can't look at that and say that because of that video that you can tell beyond a reasonable doubt that Diedrich didn't get out of that car. It's not, it's there. Which I'm glad it's there because as jurors, you don't need a detective to tell you what a video shows. You don't need anybody. You guys have two eyes and you can look at it for yourselves, and I'm asking you to please do that. Tennell also said, yeah, he would make up to $1,000 a day tattooing people. I think I'm in the wrong line of work. He also said that it wasn't rare for he didn't use a bank account, so it wasn't rare for him to have maybe up to $15,000 in the house. He would squirrel it away and have it. She also said that he was constantly playing with money. You know this, and Detective Kershaw, when I asked him, also agreed that yeah, it's not the first time that he's constantly posting with money. And yeah, listen, it's an indictment and it's kind of on his personality, right? But it's not an admission of guilt. It isn't. It's kind of dumb, and I don't think that he should be doing it. It shows that it's kind of silly that you're doing it, but it's not an admission of guilt. Then we have Detective Clint Williams. Or I'm sorry, lead crime scene investigator Clint Williams. This is the guy that's obsessed with buttoning his blazer. That every time he got up, he would button the blazer. He's obsessed with that, right? What did he say? What did you hear him say? And this wasn't on cross-examination. He said it himself. I consider that a win. Really? Because no one was talking about winning or losing. That came out of his own mouth. I don't really believe that guy. And the one thing that I believe is that he doesn't get invited to the parties. But I'm gonna tell you right now, they have parties, and you're allowed to have a party. What if you believe in your case and you spend 9 weeks trying to convict somebody that you think is guilty? You think if you win, you're not gonna go have a party and it's okay. It's normal. You know what's not okay? To come in here under oath and then lie to a jury about it. Why? It's a simple question. I asked a lot of questions just to see what the response was, and that's one of them. Because the correct, honest answer is yeah. What's wrong with that? But he didn't say that. He didn't say that. You have to use your own common sense, and when you look at somebody like that, you have to see, listen, is he a credible person? Forget about whether he's a crime scene investigator or not. He's the guy that found the live cartridge, Exhibit 29, right? Okay. I wish we had maybe the video of him finding it, but apparently, even though BSO, everybody has cameras, including the ladies and gentlemen that are here today working for BSO on their person, coincidentally, a lead crime scene investigator working a homicide on a search warrant doesn't have it. Sorry, we stopped using that a couple years ago. Why? Why? Because it would have helped you guys, right? It would have helped you guys and would have solidified whether or not I'm saying that you put that there. Well, if you had a video, we would have to think about it, but we don't because they voluntarily a couple of years ago decided to stop using it. But every other BSO running around in this courthouse, on the streets, patrolling the streets has one. But crime scene guys, they don't have it. I asked them, speaking of questions, to elicit a response, I asked them, have you ever missed out on an important piece of evidence? And if you guys remember, his response was like 4 minutes. Blah, 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 and then finally went, bling, the light bulb. Bling, the answer. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, that's the answer. That's exactly what you should have said right away. I don't know. I don't know if I missed it. I don't know it. But he took the long way home because it's a thin line between law enforcement officer or professional witness. Because a professional witness comes up there and they tell you whatever Mr. Shields wants them to say to get a conviction. And what he started off in the explanation when the answer was clearly, I don't know. Now, another question that I ask frequently, okay? Isn't it true that you can't tell whether that's real money? Detective Kershaw, oh, you want my opinion? A bunch of people, they didn't want to answer that question. The answer's, no, I can't. Simple. It's a video. And whether she wants to say, oh, they're crisp, they just came from the bank, it's a video. It's a physical impossibility for you to look at a $100 bill on a video and tell me if it's real or not. and I'm not saying that the money involved in this case is not real. I'm just telling you that the correct answer, the honest answer is no, I can't. I'm a human being. I'm not a robot. I don't have X-ray vision. I can't tell. I need to touch it, test it. The answer was clear, but every time that I asked it, they gave different answers. The forensic guy, Marshall Wilcox, I think that, I don't want to mispronounce his name. He was a pretty believable guy. From a law perspective, I believe him. What's the most important thing that came out of him? Is that DNA can stay on something for years. And I use the example of I like to go snowboarding. And if my friends ask me for my stuff, which they often do, and I lend them a mask, and they wear it 2 seasons later, is they still gonna have their DNA? And he said, yeah, it's possible, right? And another thing is this: it's a mask, and the DNA. The DNA expert that was on the stand, I think we talked about that it's an item of high absorption. I mean, you don't have to be an expert to figure that out. It's a face mask. You're breathing on it. So, regarding the face mask that was found with my client's DNA, that doesn't mean anything. That means that he wore it. That doesn't have any association of guilt. That means that at some point in the life of that mask, he wore it. And no one has given you testimony to narrowly tailor that. That's all that means. Now, it had 2 DNA profiles, right? We heard from Nicole Enoch, the DNA expert. Now, what do we hear from her? Well, there's something called star mix, that if they would have done it, it would have helped really figure out who that second person was. And they didn't do it. So, Mrs. Shields wants you to believe that there's no reason for Diedrich to have a mask other than to rob people. Okay? And we entered into evidence from Tanel a picture of him with all the entire outfit. You heard from the gentleman that worked at Rico Sports that he often bought equipment. So you have to ask, so what did she do? What did she do? She went to her go-to, Robert Allen. And then Robert Allen was like, oh yeah, no, he doesn't wear any safety equipment. Oh yeah, he doesn't wear any safety equipment. And that's when I was cross-examining him, that I called him fat. And you know what? If anybody should be calling anybody fat, it's me. But it came out. And the moral story is that his obesity is of evidentiary value. Why? Because if you're saying that my client doesn't wear a mask while riding a dirt bike, you're too big to ride dirt bike. The only reason that guy would ever get on a dirt bike is to take a picture and make a meme. There's no way a guy that size is ever going to ride a dirt bike. And so, unfortunately, his size is evidentiary value in this case. Another thing is that Robert Allen, I will get to this, Robert Allen was simply too large to even be involved in this crime. You know what I mean? They would have been like, yeah, you know, it was the big guy that was here half an hour ago. It would have been clear. But it's clear from the evidence that you heard that he does ride dirt bike, that he does wear masks when he rides dirt bike, that he does use equipment. And why is that important? Because it contradicts what one of the state's witnesses says, Robert Allen. And it goes to his veracity. Now, regarding Robert Allen, Mrs. Shields was quick to slip on the finger and be like, regarding my client, he lied repeatedly because he gave multiple versions to Detective Curcio. He lied repeatedly, that's conscious of guilt. Yeah, but what about Robert Allen? That sat here and admitted to perjuring himself I don't know how many times. How many times? You guys sat there and you took notes. How many times did Robert Allen, oh yeah, I lied, oh yeah, I lied, oh yeah, I lied. The only person that believes Robert Allen is Detective Curcio. When I asked him, oh yeah, no, he's a straight up guy, straight shooter. He literally perjured himself and admitted to perjuring himself. As a matter of fact, he was such a bad witness that from her direct, Mr. Shields' direct, to Mr. Kimmock's cross, he changed the version of the person that picked them up after that accident. It went from I don't know to you don't want me to answer that question. Really, because you were just on direct examination. All of a sudden, I don't know turned into you don't want me to answer that question. And then when I went and I asked them, everything blew up because But I'm scrutinizing your inconsistent response. All of a sudden, you don't want me to answer that question. So then that begs the question, who picked you up? Because he got into an accident and within 60 seconds somebody was there. So either, if he knows who that person is part of this. And he testified that he was scared of that person. Where's that person? That's another problem. They're not investigating this case.
Objection, silence.
In my opinion, she could basically get Robert Allen to say anything she wants. And I think that was clear. She says, he comes with a host of baggage. Really? With a host of baggage, but you guys have to depend on his testimony to convict 3 people. And he comes with his host of baggage, just brush it off. It's a host of baggage. No, he's a liar. He's an admitted liar, and they're asking people to take the word of an admitted liar to convict someone. Robert Allen stood up here and he was like, oh, I feel really bad, I'm remorseful, but he also testified that in the 5 years that he's been awaiting trial, what has he been doing? Getting face tattoos in jail. You're allowed to, as jurors, take that into consideration. He's coming up here and saying, oh, I feel really bad, but, meanwhile, in the 5 years, thug life, just tattooing his face in jail. You can take that into consideration when testing somebody's veracity as jurors. They also, Mr. Shields tried to blame the number of years between his arrest and his cooperation with COVID. And I think it was clear on the testimony of some of the detectives that there's no evidence to that. As a matter of fact, his attorney was involved in depositions, maybe like 6 months ago. When it was approaching trial, he said, I have to make a decision. And that was the decision that he made. To save himself, he was going to involve and create lies towards his friends. That's what he was going to do. Now, one of the main things that they've always harped on the entire time, he never got a deal. He never got a deal. He's doing this, but he doesn't have a deal. He's remorseful. Yeah, but he's never had a deal, because if you guys as jurors would think that he had a deal, it would bolster the notion that he's just doing this to get a deal. So I know you guys heard that quite often, okay, about Mr. Shields asking him, did I ever give you a deal? Is there any deal? Is there any deal? I know you're relying on your own recollection, and this is not an official transcript, so we'll follow along with me here. This is Mrs. Shields asking the question, right here. What kind of weapon did you say in October of 2018 that Trayvon Newsom had? This is before you had a deal. What kind of weapon?
Judge, I'm gonna object. This is not from the trial transcript.
Jury will rely on its own recollection of testimony presented at trial.
Answer.
Argument.
Answer, a handgun revolver. Question, do you recall telling Detective Curcio in that same statement, before you had a deal, what kind of weapon Michael Boatwright had? So, there you go. I mean, very rare that one of the witnesses in favor of the defense's position is gonna be the ASA herself, but whoops, she said it. What is she gonna say now? She's gonna have to stand up here and say, no, I didn't mean that. Or, I don't know what she's gonna say, but she said it. That's a deal. Which, listen, you guys have common sense. You know that there's a reason why he's doing that. That just enforces what you guys already know. You cannot believe Robert Allen. Robert Allen, the guy that coincidentally, I have 4 phones. 2 phones, like the song? No, I got 4. Why? Why do I have 4? Oh no, I do fraud. Simple. I do fraud. Oh no, that day I only had 1 because I took the day off from fraud that day. I took the day off. That day I was gonna go commit armed robbery, so I only took 1 phone. That's not. They're asking you to believe that. They're asking you to convict somebody based on that guy's testimony. And I know it's funny, but it really is not funny because at the end of the day, look at where we're at. And look at what they're asking you to do. That's a lot of pressure to put on a juror. Believe that guy, that liar. And the 1 phone disappeared, never to be found. We don't even know where it is. When I asked them what his dad did, they objected, and eventually he blurted it out himself. Oh, my dad, the drug dealer, that one of the addicts, one of his dad's addicts drove him, like, he's like bragging about his dad having addicts that drive him around. That's who he is. And apparently his dad was like the plug or the guy that hooked everybody up, but he testified that at least some of the weapons in this crime came from his dad. So who's his dad? Well, we don't know because he passed away 30 days after he cooperated. We don't know the reasons why, but we know that he testified. If my dad, that he had intricate knowledge of his dad's criminal enterprise, because he told you if my dad would have been involved with other people, whether it be Toronto or whatnot, I would have known about it. Okay? His dad arranged for him to flee this county. And his dad has never been investigated in this crime. All we heard is that Curcio knows him. They go way back because, he's a detective and the guy was a criminal, so, they go way back. Now, Robert Allen, if you heard his testimony, Robert Allen says that Diedrich is the one that was telling him what to do, that Diedrich, egged everybody on, that Diedrich looked for the car on the thing, even though they never showed one bit of evidence of that regarding if somebody Googled the car or not. They didn't show you anything regarding that, even though they had his phone and they had it pretty early on. They showed you a bunch of stuff on his phone, but they didn't show you that. Now, you gotta ask yourself, who looks like the boss there? I mean, every time you see Robert Allen, he's getting driven around. Okay, he's in the back, he's getting driven around, but he wants you to believe that Diedrich is telling him what to do. If you see him on the video, look at the video. On the video, he's in there talking on the phone, walking around. What happened on June 18th? I think it's pretty clear that Robert Allen made a phone call from one of his phones or from somebody else's phones and basically concocted what occurred. And Diedrich, what do we know about Diedrich? That's undisputed. He was a frequent customer to Riva. Everybody said it. Okay? So if anybody was going to tell him, bro, you crazy? I'm not going to do that. I come here all the time. But Robert Allen didn't care. And then the 8 minutes and 36 seconds or whatever it is that we had to sit vigil while ASA as Shields had us here in silence waiting, I'm glad you did that. That's the time that it took for Robert Allen to get reinforcements there. And you know what? What have we known? That he gets picked up like that. After the accident, 60 seconds. So in that neighborhood and in that area, they got people all around. Who? We don't know. They didn't investigate it. I asked the detectives regarding the investigation regarding that vehicle. I believe it was insufficient. I don't think that they ever followed up, because at the end of the day, it conflicted with their narrative. And to this day, anything that conflicts with their narrative, they don't want to hear about it. Which is a problem, because investigation shouldn't be like that. This is a murder investigation. You gotta think about everything. You gotta follow up on everything, not just get tunnel vision. So when you look at that video, look at it, and you're gonna see that it doesn't show what they're telling you. And listen, regarding Diedrich, what you've heard from Tenel and what you've heard from Detective Curcio is insufficient. It really is to convict. All the other evidence that is involved in him playing with money and all that other stuff, it's still insufficient. They put you in the impossible position that in order to convict Diedrich, you gotta believe Robert Allen. There's no way around it. And when you guys are in there, in that room, think about that and talk amongst each other. But there's no way around it. They put you in that position. You got to believe a known liar, someone that's already lied and admitted to lying on multiple occasions. Now, there's just problems with the investigation and things like regarding Drake and Migos. You know what? We didn't drag Drake and Migos into this. We didn't. Okay? And that's clear because on her redirect of Curcio, she asked them, were you able to verify whether or not Drake was even in South Florida in June 18th of 2018? Yeah, we verified it. And then when I cross-examined them about it, oh yeah, no, my partner, Detective Foster, yeah, he checked. But he checked in 2018? Yeah, back when it happened. Okay, he checked in 2018? And how do you do that? Oh, he checked social media. Really? This is a murder case. This is a murder case where they've already, both Foster and him have said, no, they don't have anything to do with it. They have nothing to do with it. So if they don't have anything to do with it, why are you checking the location of someone at the time of a murder? You're either a person of interest or a suspect. And that happened 5 years before I put him on my witness list. That has nothing to do with me. Part of this case from its inception. And it really baffles me, and it's really scary that BSO, once they take the step of saying, okay, we want to know where you were, anybody, in a murder investigation, okay, that means they want to know where you are. I think at that point, once the inquiry is official, I want to know where you were. It is insufficient to just say that your partner peeked Instagram or checked his Facebook. Oh, he didn't check in, he wasn't here. What is that? This is a murder investigation. You know what I mean? Like, if you care, either you care where he is or you don't care where he is. If you care where he is, checking social media is insufficient. And apparently, that's all they ever did. That's all they ever did. Question, I understand that, but let me ask you this. At what point in this investigation did Drake's name come about in your investigation? Do you recall that? I believe it came from the anonymous information that was coming in earlier on after the murder. Okay, that's the first time I was aware, but I don't recall if Detective Foster told me about it. Question, so this would be early on in the case. The tips were coming in, for weeks, for months, so I don't remember when the first Drake tip came in. So sitting here today, you can't recall when the first time you heard his name in this investigation? No. Now, would your report reflect that? If I dealt with when I first learned it, but I don't recall when I first learned it, so it's not in my report. Do you know if sitting here today, years later, if Drake's name is anywhere in your report? No, it's not. It's not. What about Migos? No. But actually, the first time that you heard the word Migos, the first time that the word Migos comes out in this investigation is not from my lips, but it's from your own when you spoke with the cooperating witness in this case, July of 2018, a month after this murder. It comes out of your mouth. Migos, isn't that true? Not that I recall. I don't know if you remember this moment. Okay, do you need something to refresh your recollection? Yeah, I would. I don't even know who Migos is. Okay, may I approach?
Judge, I'm gonna object. He's just gonna read from the transcript, and proper argument.
Overruled, it's not a transcript.
I'm going to show you a statement of Robert Allen and point to page 9. Okay, let me know when your memory is refreshed. Okay, that's his answer to me. Yes, obviously. I repeat it because obviously I didn't know what he was talking about. Yeah, that's Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen mentions Migos. I didn't recall it. And when he mentioned Migos regarding being in a weed hole prior to this, there you go. I have to read the rest of it. Yeah, obviously, it's his phone was breaking up. He saw him, I mean, again, it's breaking up. Do you want me to read the exact quote? Yes, go ahead. Let me know when your memory is refreshed. Okay. Okay, so the first time that Migos comes out in this investigation is from the cooperating witness a month after this murder. I'm sorry. Yes. Murder, correct? He's talking about something that's breaking up that I can't hear him, and he talks about a weed hole, then he mentions the word Migos. The word Migos, right? Yeah. So there you go. Because we've gotten a lot of heat, like if we're including people and celebrities, and people think that, no, the person that Mr. Onfroy was an international rap or entertainer star, and people involved in this happen to be the same thing. It's not hard to understand that. And when you read something like that, I wanted to read it to make it clear that they've been part of this case from the beginning. The first conversation that Robert Allen has with Detective Curcio, that first one, he says the word Migos. Okay? Then he says, oh yeah, I saw some video of like an assault or attack. I think it happened in Miami, but what? So, okay, hold on a minute. The cooperating co-defendant told you the first time that you talked to him the word Migos. Then later on, you saw a video of a possible assault that you think happened in Miami, and that you let it go? Because at the end of the day, he was killed by masked men. So the investigation's open. How is it that you don't follow up? Because then I asked him, and then the next time that you heard the word Migos was here today? Yeah. So how is that acceptable? It's not. It's really, really bad. It's bad investigation, okay? And it puts a prosecutor in a bad position to try and prove a case that's already from its inception faulty because of that type of investigation. That should have been followed up, but it wasn't. And there's no celebrity exclusion to murder investigations. I'm sorry. Whether you're famous or not doesn't matter. Okay, your name comes up, let's follow up. You care where he is? Find his agent, get his phone number, call him up and ask him. Do your job. No, I looked at social media. No, unacceptable. And you shouldn't be put in a position to have to accept that as jurors. They both, Detective Curcio and Detective Foster, said that they had heard about the post that Mr. Onfroy had left on his Instagram regarding Drake. They also said that they knew that after that there was a hack, that he said it had been hacked. But then I asked them both, did you see the post? No. No? You know that a post exists where a decedent is predicting who killed them. You're saying that you know it. Whether or not you think it got hacked or not, as a detective, you're not going to look at it? That's unacceptable. That's tunnel vision, that's unacceptable, and that puts you guys as jurors in a very difficult position. If it was hacked, okay, do an investigation to see if it was really hacked or not. Because if not, obviously then the post is very, very important evidence in a case like this. We're not gonna know because they didn't do it. They didn't do the job. They really owe an obligation to fully investigate things like this. But there was sufficient nexus for you to confirm that he wasn't in Broward County in June 18th of 2018. This is regarding Drake. I believe Walt Foster actually confirmed that. Oh, so it wasn't you? It was part of, I was part of the team. I'm sorry, it was part of the team. So please explain to this jury when and how you confirmed that Drake wasn't in South Florida June 18th of 2018. I think they determined on social media where he was, but I didn't do it, so you'd have to ask Detective Foster. And then I said, I understand, you made the statement that you were able to confirm that Drake was not in South Florida in June 18th of 2018. Are you telling this jury that the confirmation was simply somebody in VSO looking at Instagram and Facebook? That's the way I recall it. And I'm telling you, as jurors, that's unacceptable. Come on. Look what we're doing here. It's unacceptable. But again, it wasn't consistent with what they wanted. Tunnel vision, and we're not gonna look anywhere else. No, these guys, that's it. Boom, blinders. Blinders are for racehorses, not for detectives. He even said that he saw an attack, a physical attack on the video, but he didn't follow up. Nowhere in his report. His name comes out nowhere in his report. He said it. So how is that? How is that your partner's looking him up on, you're wondering what his whereabouts at the time of the murder, but his name is nowhere in your report? There are things that they don't want you to know. Curcio, one of the weirdest things that he said on the stand, that he can't be overworked. Really? Because every single homicide detective that works in a big metropolitan city nodded their head like, wow, you're gonna say that? Really? And on the heels of getting one of the worst school shootings probably in this nation, months before that, he's lead now, where 17 students lost their life. He gets on this case, I can't be overworked. It's either, listen, it's either he's like that or he's just saying what he wants you guys to hear. Because he doesn't want me now to scrutinize whether you are overworked. But if you are overworked and you're a detective, be honest about it. Don't come in here and lie to a jury. Because that's not appropriate for law enforcement. That's where you cross the line from law enforcement to professional witness. He also has an issue of believing, he believes Robert Allen. When I asked him, oh yeah, he's always consistent. When everybody, that guy's a known professed liar. Regarding Keith Grady, is it? The guy from Regal? Yeah, no, he checks out. Basically, is what he told you on the stand. Yeah, we talked to him, he checks out. Really, because the guy had a full conversation with Diedrich, and then the state put into evidence where they didn't even, he was unable to identify Diedrich. So is he being honest or not? Because Detective Curcio made it sound like the guy's on the up and up. So that's something for you guys to think about and look at. Is he just rubber stamping things just because it may interfere with his goal? That's the guy that bought a mask next to Diedrich. And I think the guy that sold him the mask said later on the stand that that guy was buying motorcycle equipment, but then Detective Foster said no, that he bought a mask. Again, a state witness contradicting another state witness. That's an issue for you guys. Then you have the cell phone person, Mr. Ken Van. Look, they put a lot of evidence in front of you guys in a murder case. A lot of cell phone evidence, a lot of locations, and he wants to testify that it's consistent with that. The cell phones are moving in the same direction. You know what would have been helpful for you guys? An expert witness. They could have done that. They could have made it easier for you. I had expert testimony regarding the cell phones, the trajectory, everything that an expert witness can bring to this case. They didn't do it. That's a mistake. And that's adding extra pressure for you guys because he's not an expert. He didn't testify as an expert. So all the cell phone evidence that they're making, that they're alleging is crucial in this case, it could have been provided to you in a much clearer way by an expert, and it wasn't. And that's a mistake. Another thing, Foster went up there and said, yeah, when they arrested the person that they believe is the shooter, Mr. Boatwright, that he had two phones. One of them was processed, and the other one, nah. We didn't do it. You didn't do it? After we've sat here for weeks going through cell phone evidence after cell phone evidence after cell phone evidence, the person that you think is the shooter in the case has two phones, and you decide not to search the other one? Why? That's unacceptable again. There's just things that they don't want you to know. I mean, there's either that or it's complete irresponsibility and horrible police work. Either it's on purpose or it's negligent. Either way, it affects your findings as yours, because that's unacceptable. They also want you to put a lot of emphasis on a cell phone. So do you guys think I have my cell phone on me? Maybe. Maybe not. I'm at trial. Maybe I don't want to be bothered. Would you believe it beyond a reasonable doubt? It's a tough position to put you in as jurors. It's a cell phone. I can have it on me or not. They're really asking for you as jurors to believe in coincidences. They want you to believe that Mr. Onfroy went to the bank, took out wanted a quarter million, ended up with 50 grand, coincidentally went to Riva, where there was a group of armed individuals with masks coincidentally waiting. They want you to believe that coincidence. That's what they're selling to you. And the way that they've been selling this to you for a long time has been through, and I mentioned this in my opening, how Detective Curcio, because he said that he didn't know that Mr. Onfroy was famous, but eventually he figured it out, right? And when that happened, trust me, there's pressure. That's an international entertainer that's killed in Broward County, and the whole world is looking for answers, and they're looking for arrests. Make no mistakes about it. You can use your common sense about that. And I talked to you about how he wrapped up his solution nice and tight with a bow, and he took it to his supervisors. And just like Mrs. Shields brought her little Russian doll, I too like props, so I made this. There you go. That's it. That's the perfectly prepared, perfectly manicured solution that Detective Curcio immediately manufactured, including these three defendants, and he took it to his supervisors, division chief or whoever's on top of him in the chain of command. Look, I figured it out. Here you go. That guy got it, went off the chain of command of VSO, and it eventually goes to the captain. Eventually, this nice and neat solution, gift wrap solution, makes its way to the Broward County State Attorney's Office, where it's hot potato from different state attorney to state attorney, until it lands on Mrs. Shields' desk. And she's come here and she's done the best she can. And she's extremely talented. You guys know that. There's no mistake in that. But in the end, she wants you to accept something like if it's perfect when it's not. She wants you to believe that their case looks like that their case is perfect, that their case has no faults. But when you realize and you think about everything that I told you, the lack of the investigation, the refusal to follow up on important leads, the insistence on anchoring your case to a known perjurer that stood up there and lied, all of that, basically a trial, the way I look at it, is every time that this perfectly made little wrap box solution rubs up against the truth by way of cross-examination, by way of witnesses that took the stand, whether you believe them credible or not. If you don't believe, it starts to rub up against the truth. And little by little, this perfect solution, wrap solution, interferes. And as an attorney, I feel like sometimes, like my job is like pet detective when he's kicking the box down the hallway in the beginning. That's sometimes the way that I feel that I have to do when they bring to a jury these solutions, these premature solutions that are fictitious and that involve perjured testimony and that involve all the things that you've seen and all the things that we've talked about. And in the end, she wants you to believe that her case looks like that. But her case doesn't look like that. Her case looks like that. That's the way a case looks when it's based on lies. That's the way a case looks when it's based on perjured testimony. That's the way a case looks when detectives fail to follow up on leads. That's the way a case looks when they fail to process a phone of a suspected shooter. When they fail to track down the car that rolled up while the Dodge Journey was waiting, when they ignored that. When they allege that Dietrich took an Uber, but they don't back it up with any evidence, they don't figure it out. You don't think that they could have figured that out? Or maybe they could have figured it out because it took Robert Allen 5 years or 4 years to come up with that story. When they say over and over that Robert Allen doesn't have a deal, and you hear her say it from her own mouth, that's what happens. That's what it looks like when you wrap up a bunch of lies and you try and sell it to a jury. And when you guys go back in there, listen, I know that it's not an easy thing to be put in your position, but they put you in that position. And I want you to understand that there's no way that you can convict Dietrich Williams without believing Robert Allen. And if you believe that to be true, and I'm talking to all of you, and I'm talking to each of you, if you believe that you cannot convict Dietrich Williams if you don't believe Robert Allen, and I'm asking you to hold true to that, because it's the just thing. You know what I mean? Like, you can't convict somebody if you don't believe the main witness. You know, when I was preparing for this, I thought about, my life. It was a big case for me. And the reason that I became an attorney is there's an attorney by the name of Jerry Spence. He's 94 years old, but he's a fantastic attorney. He's really well known in the legal community. And I saw a mock trial that he did on TV when I was young. I was a teenager many years ago. And that's the moment when I saw him, that's the moment that I knew that I wanted to be an attorney. And in that mock trial, he gives a story. And they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So I'm going to try and say it for you guys. I hope I don't mess it up. The story is the story of a smart aleck boy and a wise old man. There's a smart aleck boy that wants to play a trick and fool a wise old man. So he comes up with this idea that he finds a bird in the forest. And he's going to go up to the old man. And he's going to tell the old man, "Old man, what do I have in my hands?" And then the old man's going to say a bird, because remember, he's wise. So we'll figure that out. So he's going to say, "You have a bird." And then he's going to say, "But is it alive or is it dead?" And if the old man says, that the bird is dead, he's going to open up his hands and let the bird fly out and fly to the forest. But if the old man says the bird is alive, he's going to squeeze it and squeeze all the life out of it until it's dead, and then he's going to open up his hands and say, see, the bird is dead. So the smart aleck boy does that. He gets the bird and he brings it to the wise old man, and he says, old man, what do I have in my hands? And he says, you have a bird, son. And he says, but is it alive or is it dead? And the old man says, the bird is in your hands. And with that, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I leave in your hands the history of XXX Tentacion and the case of the state of Florida versus Egypt. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's just about 4:30, and counsel for Mr. Boatwright is next. He tells me it's going to be more than 30 minutes for his argument. And in fairness, I told him I would not have him stop if I had to cut him halfway through and, break up his argument that way. So we will go ahead and recess for the evening. As each time we break, you're not to form any definite or fixed opinions. The merits of the case, to hear all the evidence, arguments, counsel, instructions on the law by me. Till that time, do not discuss case even among yourselves. During the course of the trial, we take regular recesses during which you're permitted to separate, go about your personal affairs. During these recesses, you shall not discuss the case with anyone nor permit anyone to say anything to you in your presence. If anyone attempts to, tell me on the jury, ask them to stop. Deputies. If you see counsel, witnesses, defendants, anyone else associated with the case in the hallway, they will ignore you. They're not being moved. They're following the court's orders. Please make sure to insulate yourself from any media exposure, social media, anything like as you have been up to this point. So just for timing, we'll reconvene again at 10:30 tomorrow. Counsel for Mr. Boatwright will give his closing. The state has an opportunity for their rebuttal argument, and I will instruct you, and we'll have it in your hands tomorrow. So with that, thank you for your attention today. Have a great evening.